Hello and welcome to Smaulgld's Russian Central Bank Gold Reserve Update for the month of February 2017. Russian Central Bank continues its world-leading gold acquisition spree in February. Now we've got a lot of charts today, so if you'd like to follow along, if you go to the Smaulgld site, you can see the charts better. I'll put a link below to the specific article, or you could just go to smaulgld.com and check out the section. The way you check out all of the Russian gold reserves is go to gold, gold reserves, Russia and gold, and there you can see years worth of Russian gold data. You can do the same for China. Back to our podcast. Central Bank of Russia added 300,000 ounces of gold to reserves in February. Central Bank of Russia added 9.33 tons of gold, which now makes them they're still in sixth place. They're behind China, the People's Bank of China, but they now have 1,654 tons of gold. And the Russian Central Bank has added nearly 175% more gold to her reserves than the People's Bank of China has done over the past 12 months. Quickly, that doesn't mean that there's less gold consumption in China than Russia. That's not the case. There's obviously more gold consumption in China than Russia through the Shanghai Gold Exchange, and they also import tremendous amounts of gold through Hong Kong and Shanghai, and they also have the world's leading mining production in China, but it just doesn't all end up on the People's Bank of China's balance sheet. Indeed, China has been selling reserves and not really adding that much gold to their reserve position. Overall, Russian reserves are increasing. They went from 390 billion in January all the way up to 397 billion in February. So Russia has been improving, or the Central Bank of Russia has been improving its financial position by adding not only gold to reserves, but increasing their overall gold reserves. And we're going to see their U.S. Treasury position in a minute. We're also going to check out their mining production and their historic additions of gold to reserves over the past couple of years. Remember, if you're not a Smaulgld subscriber, you can subscribe on the Smaulgld website. You'll get these top news stories sent to you directly via email. I don't send out an email every time I publish a blog post, but something like this, you would get an email so you could check out the charts and see the podcast as well. You can also donate to Smaulgld via Bitcoin, PayPal, and you can become a patron at the links below. So over the last couple of years, Russia has added tremendous amounts of gold, about 200 tons each year. 208 tons in 2015, about 199 tons last year in 2016, and they ended last year with 1,614 tons. Now in February, Russia added another 300,000 ounces, or about 9.3 tons, and that brought it all the way up to 1,654 tons. In January, Central Bank of Russia had added 1 million ounces, or about 31 tons. So they've added over 40 tons of gold so far in 2017. Here's your chart that shows the dramatic rise in Russian gold reserves. We're going to take a look at how that compares to the rest of the world's central banks. But you can see that 375 tons have been added since June 2015. Quite a remarkable rise in their gold reserve position. And then since 2009, Russia has added about 1,000 tons of gold. And that's more than China, who's added only about 775 tons during the same period. Now, Russia has continued to purchase gold at a rapid rate over the past year. The People's Bank of China has slowed down. We'll take a look at a chart in a second below. But here's the monthly gold positions or additions by the Russian Central Bank. And you can see some months they add almost over 1 million, in many cases over 1 million ounces a month. And some months they don't add any, but overall they're averaging about 500,000-600,000 ounces a month over the past few years there. So they've added 18.5 million ounces from June 2014 to February 2017, or almost 600 tons. If you want to add some gold to your own reserves, you can do so through the Smaulgld site at BGSC, Golden Eagle Coins, JM Bullion, Money Metals Exchange, and also our friends over at SD Bullion. You can do that by clicking on the links on the site or the links below. It's not investment advice to buy or sell gold or silver, but if you are interested in doing so, Smaulgld gets a small commission. So that's another way of helping out the site, is by buying your precious metals through the Smaulgld links, and you can compare pricing and shipping, and you pay no more no less than if you visited the sites directly. So if you are interested in buying gold or silver, please consider doing so through the Smaulgld site. Here's what we're talking about: Russia adding gold to reserves at a faster pace than China. You can see Russia red, China blue. I haven't updated this for January and February, but basically since November 2016, the People's Bank of China gold reserves position has been the same, and Russia has added 1.3 million ounces, or 40 tons more, since the end of last year. So Russia continues to add gold, and China, we'll see in a minute, they've sold over $1 trillion worth of reserves in general. So the fact that they're keeping their gold reserves at a steady pace or slightly increasing them over the past year is a good sign that they have an interest in rebalancing their reserves to be more towards gold. But as a percentage of reserves, China has, or the People's Bank of China has, relatively little gold. It's only a single digit percentage point of their overall reserves. Here's the league table. On the top 10, you can see Russia is now only about 150, 175 tons away from China. They could pass them in the next couple of years if they continue to add at this rapid pace. Again, these are the quote official numbers that the central banks report. You could take them with whatever grain of salt or seriousness as you wish, but again, I only can publish what is published. I do not invent numbers and then publish them. I leave them for you to take a look at. So Russia is sixth amongst nations. You don't count the IMF, so you got U.S., Germany, Italy, France, China, and then Russia. Now, overall, Russian reserves have grown since last year, and I've done a chart here so you can see. There's a monthly, but you can track that individually. I have the numbers. I didn't put them on the chart, but you can see here over the last year or so, the Russian overall reserves have grown from about 370 billion up to about 390 billion. So they are shoring up their position. The blue is overall reserves, and then this is the amount that they have in currency. The latest report from the Central Bank of Russia shows that the gold that they held at the end of February was worth about 66.8 billion, and then I took that and I calculated what percentage that was of their overall reserves of about 397 billion. It's about 17%. And here is just a chart of the reserves, not including breaking it down by currency, but you could see they've increased and maintained a decent reserve balance, unlike our friends in China, who have seen a dramatic decrease in their reserve holding from over 4 billion to, at one point, I think in January, they were down to 2.9 trillion. They're right back above at about 3 trillion now. Now, Russian treasury holdings, a lot of talk about dumping of treasuries. Well, Russia seems to have stopped dumping their treasuries over the last year. You can see they have basically held steady, and it's part of prudent central bank management. I mean, they do deal with the rest of the world. Most of the world's central banks do hold significant amounts of U.S. treasuries. They're liquid. So as part of any prudent central bank policy, you would think that they would have a decent amount of U.S. treasuries, and they do. I don't think that they'll probably go much lower, and this is even after sanctions and all of the anti-Russian sentiment in the United States. Still, as part of international trade, they realize, and also just as their own balance sheet position, they keep a decent amount of U.S. treasuries. Now, China is a different story, because let me just show you here's the when Russia started to dump. Though they used to have a lot more, but then you see that kind of leveled out in the end of 2015. The dumping stopped, and ever since then they've kind of maintained an 85 to 90 billion position. But they used to have a lot more. They used to have 130, 140 billion. But still, in the grand scheme of things, that's what, half a month of QE when the Fed was doing QE back in 2013. So Russia never really had a lot of U.S. treasuries, and part of that is because they never had a lot of trade with the U.S., so they never needed to have that many, but they do need them just for their overall balance sheet. Now, China's a little different. You can see China's not only dumped its overall reserves, but you see they've dumped a decent amount of their treasuries as well. And Russia, as you can see, look, if China has over $1 trillion in U.S. Treasury, still makes them second behind Japan, and Russia only has 86%. Russia basically has less than 10% of the amount of treasuries that China has. Rubles for gold. This is a chart I put together that shows Russia is either second or third in the world in terms of gold production behind China. China, I think, does about 450, 460 tons a year, and the Russia does about 300 tons. Russia's been adding a decent amount of its own production to its reserves. That's where they get their gold from. They're not really importing from elsewhere, and they also sell some to China. So that indicates that China has a very voracious appetite, because not only does China have 450, 460 tons a year that they produce, they also import hundreds of tons through Hong Kong, an undisclosed amount through Shanghai, and so they are definitely interested in, well, not interested in gold, but they definitely have a larger appetite for gold than Russia has, but perhaps not on a proportional basis, because obviously China has well over 1 billion people and Russia has a much smaller population. But Russia is adding its gold to its domestic production, to reserves. China is probably doing the same. But again, if you take China's domestic production and you add it up over the past 3 years, that would give you what the People's Bank of China has on its balance sheet, and they don't. So China does not add all of the gold that it produces to its balance sheet. Some of that goes probably to satisfy other banks in China's gold reserve needs. It probably goes into trading on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, and of course that doesn't even, the 450 tons a year doesn't satisfy, that they mine, doesn't satisfy China's overall gold consumption, because they obviously import tremendous amounts through Hong Kong and Shanghai. That about does it. So thank you very much for listening. We'll have more coming up during the week. And please remember to subscribe to Smaulgld.com. Follow us on Twitter at Smaulgld.